and say, oh, now it sees us and now it hears us. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, testing, testing. Awesome. Lovely. New. Tap, tap. There you go.
There you go.
You're good. Yep. You're right on it.
Can you, so can,
Chief?
click the up
Come on.
arrow, the carrot on the mic for me, please?
Okay, 6 p.m. We'll call the meeting to order. And ask if either for an approval of the agenda as presented or ask for if there are adjustments.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second that. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. 3, consider approval of previous meeting minutes. Make a motion to review. Second, Abby?
Oh, second, I'm sorry.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Counselor, nobody on, right? No guests in the house? Then we will have your report.
Lovely. So the committee reorganization went through council a couple of weeks ago. Promised the advisory board to make a change. I will once again ask the committee to consider whether or not they want to ask the council to expand us from 5+ me to 7+ me to help us. We've had some foreign issues the past couple of months. And there were some folks who have been, the way the committee reset worked is that basically no one's getting kicked off of a committee, but folks will sunset in some of the committees where there are more than 9 members right now. So the understanding was that we combined 2 committees and the total number was 12, for example. 3 of those people would eventually grandfather off the committee. We would replace them to 12. We would just replace that up to 9. So point being is there are folks who have been reassigned or taken off committees, and I know there are folks that have reached out to me expressing interest in this committee. So I think that there would be applicants if we did. So I just need for anything to think about. And I have 2 questions for the chief, which might already be in your report. So chief, you can just let me know if you're going to cover these things. Just an update on the getting close to June, so an update on the timeline for body cams. And as well as a press conference that's happening in Montpelier tomorrow. Which I'm not going to say anything accusatory, but I found out from a friend through a Facebook post of the Montpelier Police Department, and it said that very municipal leaders will be taking part in the press conference to talk about the ending of the GA hotel program.
So the first question on the body cameras, I'm still waiting for word on whether we got the grant, which is the SRT, the Small and Rural and Tribal Police Agencies grant. And I was told by Trevor Whipple that the money for the state of Vermont, this is a few weeks ago, he said which I didn't quite understand, he said the RFP was going to be in 6 weeks. I'm not sure what that, I think he just meant to say grant announcement. So I'm waiting to see on that as well. So yes, we are moving forward. Putting some pressure on things. As far as the press conference in Montpelier, yes, the homelessness issues that are coming about by the voucher ending program, we've been meeting and discussing what we're going to be expecting and how to respond to that. And the idea was we were going to try to put some pressure on the state to fix what they created. For lack of a better term. So Bill Fraser, the Montpelier manager, had been getting in touch with some folks, and Sue Mentor got involved, and they put together a press conference where they want the managers, mayors, council chair, and select board chairs to be at to pressure the state. How much pressure they can put on. Because I understand anybody reads the Vermont Digger, Cummings pretty much said, well, it's ending. So what they're gonna do, it seems like they've washed their hands with it.
Especially with trying to get out of there. Great, and so.
They managed to give themselves a pay raise though.
So just so I just want to, I'm sure Nicholas. Did you hear from Nicholas about this press conference or?
It actually came from Bill Frazier.
It was just, like I said, I saw it on Facebook and I had heard nothing about it and I didn't know.
I
emails about it,
believe-
so-
I believe Nicholas will be giving you an update at the council meeting. It just came out.
Okay.
Yesterday.
And I just got an email.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah.
Hey, we're doing a press conference.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, totally, and like I said, I wasn't trying to accuse, but I saw that, well, very municipal leaders will be taking part in the press conference about homeless. Yeah, I have no idea what this is.
it's to put pressure.
Yeah. Good, good, good. And that is it.
Did you want to add, I know there's some folks on here that their tenure is up and they're reapplying or we talked about expanding. I believe it's going to be coming up soon. The application goes before the council and you have to review before the council.
Yes, Nicholas has the people, there's, two of us, I think, is there three of us?
I think it's just two. I think it's-
Yes,
I think
Abby and I both
it's- yeah.
have submitted our,
Yeah.
and Nicholas has responded and said he received them.
Okay.
And then he would set it up, he also, said that he would set it up for me, because it's select board night for me. He's gonna set it up so I can pop out to my truck and zoom in.
I think it's coming up in one of the, they're gonna start.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Committee.
Can
Yep.
you both reapply?
Yeah.
That's at mine as well.
I was gonna say, I thought there was three of us, yeah.
Is it three? Okay, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure.
I'm not sure who got.
He sent me an email that said, your committee is all set, so I'm assuming that means he must have gotten yours. So chief, it's up to you, unless anybody has other questions for council.
All right. We had our promotions. Well, they've officially been promoted, but we haven't had any promotion ceremony, but Corporal Brian Hoare was promoted to sergeant. Sir Brittany Lewis was promoted to captain. And a little tidbit of history, she is the first female in the department history to be promoted.
Nice.
We also have Sarah Puris. She takes her polygraph tomorrow, and she has her medical the day after, on the 10th. And if all goes well, which I don't think there will be any problem, she will be sworn in on Monday and begin working for us that Monday on the 15th. She will be attending the level 2 academy in June and then the full-time level 3 academy in August, which bringing her in brings us down to 3 vacancies.
Chief, I'm sorry, can you say her name again?
Sarah, with an H, Kuris, K-U-R-I-S.
Thank you.
She graduated April 20 from Norwich University with a criminal justice degree.
This is someone who served as an intern.
Yes,
Yes. Nice to know that program works.
absolutely. And this fall semester, I interviewed 3 interns for the fall semester and I hope to have 2 of us this fall. She said it's a great way to bring folks in the door if they're going to stay in Vermont. There's a lot of folks that do come from other states and they just have to do the intern experience and then go back to home states, which is fine. It's good to give them time. My report.
Come on, 2 months and that's all you guys have got for us?
I mean, I could go on.
I said we
I don't
were
want- I don't want to drown you guys with the boring details.
Right. All right. Any questions for the chief? I will ask about the school. Is that ongoing and meetings are still happening? The emergency
Yes.
piece of that is going on, good.
Yep, we actually, we went to the elementary school and did an unannounced evacuation drill down there. Very, very telling. So we're going to do another unannounced, clear the halls, lockdown drill, as we call it. Prior to the end of the year. Preparedness plans. As you know, we finally got card reader access for all the parent. districts.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to number 7, which is to discuss the telephone communications policy. This is the shortest of the 5 policies that you sent us. It's trying to keep us
Don't worry, I got
busy.
10 more in the queue. I just gotta hit the send button.
So as usual, we'll start, this is number 205, and we'll start on page 1. Does anybody have anything on page 1? Hearing nothing, we'll move to page 2. So it's telephone reporting. There's nothing on page 2. We'll move to page 3. Which includes restrictions and use of office telephones and department issued smartphones. Personal use of issued smartphones.
Under sheets smartphones, this is just question B, and then the first bullet point. Second sentence, it says accepting emergency communications is not supposed to say accept. It's ECT,
No, it's
or I don't
not,
understand
it's
it.
accepting emergency it's means accepting emergency.
That just sounded funny.
One that says telephone communications, number 205. That's your agenda,
Wait, that's all I got.
but you should, that's because that was the one you picked up a month ago.
No, this
or
was the other day,
previous
this
meeting.
one,
Right,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this one. It's from the last. meeting.
yep, so it should be in that batch. That's what we were gonna do is the,
Yeah,
well, that's from
yeah, that's from
February.
February.
Yeah, that's old.
As long as it means accept, that's fine with me.
You don't have,
Nope.
You have any of the ones from tonight?
she has 601, which you sent, which was different.
Yep.
But I assumed that since she had all the others, I didn't bother printing them all for her, so. I can probably share mine with you, so that's page 2.
Everything.
Page 3 there. Does anybody have anything on page 3? If there's nothing on page 3, then we'll flip to page 4. Anybody have anything on page 4? Okay, since we have no questions, I would entertain a motion that we approve the telephone communications policy.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? All the motion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the next item is to discuss and consider approving, this is number 8, individuals with mental health issues or impairments. Okay, so this is number 411. Page 1. Anybody have any questions on page 1? Hearing none. Page 2. I guess I had a note why we needed to call out. I guess you're just outline what the Americans with Disabilities Act is. That's okay. I was just wondering why we needed to call it out specifically, but I guess it's part of the overall, okay. Sure. Anything on page 2? Going to page 3, which includes number 4, mental health issues and memory impaired persons. I had a question mark next to letter C under mental health issues. Just wondering why. I mean, is that pertinent to the officers to know that 10% of the population?
It is, I think, just because they deal with such a large volume of people with mental health issues. So that's why it's in there.
Okay.
That would make them kind of cognizant that this is,
It's probably,
it's trouble.
Yeah.
Exactly.
you know, there, if you split hairs and you say a mental health issue and someone in a mental health crisis, we deal with it all the time, so it just reiterates. For instance, the other day, Friday, we had an issue, and the officers did a great job giving time and distance and de-escalating individual crisis without having to use force. And
Do you call Gary or someone will call when?
yeah, we call the on-call screener, and actually, now that you brought that up, this was also provided to Gary for review as well. So this was vetted by him as well. But yes, we call the on-call screener.
Yeah, I figured.
Gary Gordon is with the Washington County Mental Health. He basically runs the screening program.
Okay, anything else on page 3? Here, now we'll move on to page 4. I have questions under common symptoms, letter B. I have 2 or 3 that I've put an asterisk next to. I guess my question is, how is the officer to know that the person has a loss of interest in one's pleasurable activities?
That's just something that they can ask, through conversation.
Okay,
It's just explaining what depression is, but through conversation, by knowing what all the signs and symptoms of it are, they can start asking questions. For instance, like one of the questions that we ask somebody to gauge whether they may be suicidal or not is if they have plans for the next day. When we converse with them, we start asking them those types of questions. So they're just outlining what those symptoms are.
okay.
Could some of this be also some of these callings that hey, there's a family member or a friend of them that's in crisis and they have a
I'm sorry, under the thought disorders, are those, where did those definitions come from, like rational statement?
Yeah, they come from all the cadre of trainings that we have. They came over.
In under that. Council under C, irrational statements, the second sentence says expressing thought of greatness. Well, maybe that was supposed to be thoughts of greatness. Pick that out.
Well, it's expressing thought of greatness. It could be thoughts.
Okay.
It's one thought.
Okay, any other questions on page 4? Page 5. Covers expression of feelings, behavior, cognitive impairments. Anybody have any questions on page 5?
it looks like some of this is like the expected feeling is what may be communicated by a third party to the officer responding to You know, because they're not gonna know necessarily.
Right.
But of that,
It could be either or, it could be third party providing that information, or it could just be the knowing the symptoms with the officer could be some.
Anything else on 5? We'll move on to page 6. Which covers common encounters, response to people with mental health issues.
It's partially 6 and partially really either. It's a combined question about number 6 and the mental health condition. So the first question is the reasoning for not under C. The mental health clinician is not listed as one of the guidelines. The following guidelines detail how to approach and correct people with mental health issues. And the mental health clinician is not listed. That just because it's dealt with later in
It's
the policy that you're,
Yeah.
okay, that just makes I understand your thoughts, so then. I'll hold my other question.
Anything else on page 6? Moving on to page 7. Which is continuation of G. Anything on page 7? Nothing. I move to page 8. Covers interview and interrogation, community mental health resources, and the police mental health clinician. Counselor, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, there's nothing in the policy that it's completely up to the officers when she engages with the mental health clinician. Is that the correct
So
policy?
not necessarily, so the mental health clinician is a resource that is with the officers, so they're gonna, whether they're be interacting with a dispatcher on the phone with somebody, or they're responding to the scene. They will be going. over here. It's a shared resource between here and Montpelier. It's
Yeah.
currently vacant.
Yeah.
We've been having interviews, and none of them unfortunately worked out.
So what is the like? I'm just trying to understand how the process works. Is there a trigger word so that when like it's a cause ditch or someone calls dispatch and says someone like having a mental health crisis, they automatically go or the officer arrives without this, probably saying the officer was arrives or realizes someone.
It could be a. So we've had a lot of instances where the officers out in the field request that the mental health clinician come if they're available to come this way. Or if it's a known individual that they're familiar with or a known circumstance, then just
And is there, is there a reason that what you just described is not, or at least I didn't see what you just said written down.
right, it's not, and I get what you're asking, you're
Yeah,
asking
yeah.
why, like, in that response to, you
Right.
know, notify the mental health.
Yes.
It's just a resource here that's known to be used, it's not specifically outlined, you must call them.
Is it part of the officer's training to learn to identify?
Yes, all the, and I probably should have mentioned it in the chief's report. We completed our first class of CIT, the crisis intervention training. Everybody here will be going through it. So far, I've only been able to send one officer and one dispatcher to the one class that they had. But we're gonna have several more through the grant, and everybody here, all dispatch staff and sworn members will have to go through that CIT training.
And is that something that you like to do, a train the trainer, so that you'll have somebody in-house that's
Yep,
expert in it, probably do your training?
They're going to be doing a train the trainer for the coordinator. They're called coordinators for the CIT. They're gonna have. And we have what's called the CIT steering committee between the folks that are running the grant through the hospital and Montpelier and us. We're identifying who we want to be the coordinators to run the program, and they will be doing for the continuation.
So then your onboarding will be done, should be able to be done in how?
Well, it's a 40-hour class, so it's not something that you can just,
Yeah.
kind of like firearms where you take a day.
Yeah.
So they're going through that process. Once everybody gets trained, as we have new folks that come on board, if they don't already have that training, we will have to send them to the training. Once there's a class.
And is that class something that is currently available at the academy?
There's only 2 places in the state currently, CIT. Down in Hartford and Washington.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go down the rabbit hole.
No, hey, no problem.
So I was just saying before to move on from that, but my ultimate goal would be to have the mental health commission be a full-time. My goal would be to have the health commission full-time with the department. More of a prescribed. They are. I understand we're not there now, and I totally get the reasoning.
We also just through that CIT program, Turning Point got a grant for a shared resource again between Montpelier and Berry and recovery coach.
Oh, great.
He was just onboarded. His name is Mark Farley. We just actually today. He just came in and we put him through the necessary, the CGIS fingerprinting, taking the CGIS test. He actually went out and grabbed a five for the day. He's already made some contacts out in the public. Of course, you can't force somebody, but we can at least, have that conversation. So you'll see him out and about with the officers as well. So when it's fully complemented, we would have Brooke, the community outreach specialist, the mental health clinician.
So I just want to make a comment on what Teddy said. So I have a lot of experience with who has a severe mental illness and with public safety as well as just mental health clinicians engaging in that situation. And sometimes that's not always a good thing because that person may not want to be associated with that because they don't think they have a mental illness. So just, I would be cautious about having to have somebody all the time. Because it just may, that person may react.
That was page 8. Is there anything else? Everybody good? Move on to page 9. Which covers patrol operations. Emergency and after hours information and reporting and follow-up. Nothing on page 9.
Make a comment on the full operation with death, natural accidental suicide, homicide. Just at the American Legion Convention in Indianapolis, in Colorado City. And actually, before that, what they're changing nationally in the region, anyway, is because of the veteran suicide issues. They've changed the wording to death by suicide as opposed to committing suicide. It takes a little bit of the onus off, it's almost like you got hit by a car, but in this case, you didn't. Other than just something. Throw it out there.
That was a good point. I just read. Speak about it when I read.
Anything else? Page 9. Steve, do you feel strongly that you want to ask to have that wording changed?
Yeah, I think it should. I think
So the bullet that says deaths and in the parentheses,
under by suicide rather than just.
just suicide.
And that actually came from a session we were at a couple of weeks ago in Massachusetts. And there was a lady from the VA down there that's her specialty. And that they were the ones that actually started to change the wording and get them out.
I think I got it very well. Related to the VA.
Anything else? Moving off of page 9, going to page 10. Under confidentiality. So common practice would be that any touches like this would be entered into Valcor. In other words, if you went to someone's home, because a family member said they thought they were in crisis, and you went, you had a conversation, it was deemed not to be an issue, does that get put into Valcor as a?
So there would be a welfare check
Mhm.
card punched.
Okay.
But it wouldn't necessarily outline the mental health condition. I mean, it would be attached to the case,
Okay.
but it wouldn't like involve all of that information.
Okay. I was just in reading this. That they have to ask not to provide that kind of clinical information. That's why I was asking if it was just automatically put in. Okay. Thank you. Under 12A. Is, I don't know if it's just my eyes, but the first line and the second and third line appear to be different font
It does
size.
look like it's different font, does it?
You have good eyes.
Yeah.
You have good eyes. I think that's probably 10 or 5, something needs to be-
And I just. I think we meant to say, but on the same thing, community outreach structure designed to interrupt. Like a serious family, personal criminal problem, the mental health condition follow. So is that supposed to say community outreach?
Yes.
That's supposed to.
Where were you?
Same bullet,
Same thing,
it says mental health commission rather than.
Okay. Yep. Good catch.
yes, very good catch. Putting both in the same policy. You start talking about one and you keep going about that one.
All right, anything else on 10? Page 11. Covers training, cancellation, at the signature page. So I think we've already answered this, and that I asked, you talked about in letter A, the Berry City PD shall provide entry-level personnel with training on this subject. That will provide, but currently that is not available. Is that correct?
Well, they get mental health training, but not CIT.
Okay. Okay. And so the mental health training, again, is that something that they're trained here, or is that academy driven?
We are required to have the training through the use of force as well as through the academy. So they get that when we go. But I'm going to make sure through the CIT program, they have the benefits to
That extra one. Okay. Thank you. That's it for page 11. I would entertain a motion to approve 411 individuals with mental health issues and impairments as amended.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion in a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right. Number 9. Domestic violence policy to discuss and consider approving. This is number 414, domestic violence. Does anybody have any questions on page 1?
And I will preface this with, there was an additional policy that went with this about dealing with an unfortunate incident with officers involved with domestic violence. However, I see it's going through the legislature where there's a current model policy there. And they want the LEAB, which is a law enforcement advisory board, to revamp that policy. So I wasn't gonna waste my breath putting that through when that's gonna undergo changes.
We did that.
Yeah, so
it was not.
Yes.
Anything on page 1? Now we'll go to page 2. This talks about bodily injury, defendant, domestic standby, foreign abuse prevention order, plaintiff, protection order, self-defense, vulnerable adult. The person's eligible for a leave at the bottom of the page.
The majority of this is all written in statute.
Anything on 2? Moving to page 3. This covers arrest without a warrant and arrest for domestic violence.
When it comes to a vulnerable adult, and so somebody has reported a death or multiple people have, including other healthcare providers, how does that work? Like,
So usually we get the agency on aging involved, or
Okay.
say yes. And when there's issues like that, if we can have, sometimes it's hard to get like the information, especially if the person has dementia, so those types of situations. Those types of situations where we need extra assistance from those that may know or have witnessed something to come forward. But it goes through the entire process. And if there's a crime committed, the offender will be charged. But again, it goes with the assistance of the Adult Protective Services. They can do an interview as well. And bring forth that information. So the bottom line is, yes, if there's domestic abuse going on, still be charged. A lot of the times there's issues where you may have an individual with dementia that is the perpetrator that is acting on their spouse. In those instances are not competent to stand trial, so other alternatives have, that's when the Adult Protective Services has to get involved to come up with some sort of plan. And ultimately, sometimes it's, having a caregiver there all the time,
right?
whatever the situation is, but it can be very tricky.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of a situation where yes, isn't always, but just based on my experience as
On the ball.
yeah. And so, I'm thinking of individuals that are disabled, care for in someone's home. And they're not always necessarily. And I guess if there are calls, I would suspect you guys are mandated reporters as well.
We are mandated reporters. We do get calls for those types of things, investigations. Whether it be abuse or even more so like emotional abuse, that sort of thing where it gets reported. And then we get the resource support agencies involved.
Can you give us an idea how many domestic violence calls we get here?
Without looking at the numbers, I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you Berry City has major alcohol and domestic liquor. And I don't know if you saw when it started coming out, I know the mayor was quite upset with this one. Commissioner of Public Safety, Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
It was rolling out a stat-based model where all the information comes out of Valcor and look at various things. She actually called me and asked, she said, it was 62% of all the crimes that we had in our report. And it was a significant 360 for what she had, I forget the time period that she looked at. She's like, there's 360 incidents, which was the 62% out of all that they looked at, where domestic violence she goes out, because you folks may be miscoding something. Oh, we don't have a domestic violence calls. And then they did this story and it perpetuated into her kind of taking the day of their side. Trying to work through that. But yes, we do have a big one. We also have a very high, which is kind of related into the human trafficking. When you think of human trafficking, people think, smuggling children across borders. But if you're in an abusive relationship, your partner is forcing you to have sexual relations for drugs or those types of things, there's a lot of crossover aspects. And there's a lot of domestic violence.
My windows in my apartment face Pearl, so I'm facing Jerry Cross, the apartment right attached to it. I've seen so much stuff outside that window, domestic and women getting, dragged out and that's going on. Yeah, it's bad.
Well, part of me wishes I hadn't asked, but thank you.
I had a quick question, on question B, the last bullet point. It says, the factors that the court may consider when determining whether a dating relationship exists or existed include the length of time since the relationship was terminated, if applicable, or like, is there a time limit?
So hypothetically speaking, if you become quote unquote boyfriend and girlfriend and your own boyfriend and girlfriend for 3 hours, you may not be able to.
Gotcha.
That's just one of the terms that they put in.
I thought it was like after you broke it up with somebody for so long and then.
It could,
like,
it could be,
weeks go by.
it could be that as well.
Yeah.
Where is, 3 years ago.
Yeah,
But however, that said, as long as you've had a relationship, you're considered a person eligible. So, for instance, you could have been divorced, say, 25 years. So, partner comes back with money. You still have a relationship, so you're still considered quote unquote.
that is good to know. That is really good to know.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Okay.
Anything else on page 3? Moving to page 4, which covers mutual assault and dual arrest, investigation and evaluation of injuries, self-defense consideration. Anybody have anything there? We'll say, as I've gone through this, not be your officers, so trying to find that.
Under their way through domestic situations. They are quite frustrating.
Nothing on page 4, we'll move to page 5. Evaluating, collecting evidence. There's nothing there, we'll move to page 6. Which covers the domestic violence lethality screening. Nothing on page 6. We move to page 7. It includes assisting the victim. There's nothing on page 7. We'll move to page 8.
I do just have a question. So, I actually have 2 questions. So, long-term domestic violence. So, I guess, I think, I have the answer, I just want to put it out there. So, somebody's been in a relationship, or it could even be a family member. And it gets to the point where the person who's been abused, maybe there have been some calls, but not a lot. That's something really drastic in the sense of using like it must be, the amount of force, like. Hit somebody. So how does that like work? So I would suspect that
What do you
at
think?
that level,
Are you saying the person that was abused
Yeah.
for years ends up shooting somebody?
yeah, like it gets to the point where it's, you guys were called in and, they're trying to protect their children or something. There's been a long-term violent situation. And it's never been involved. I mean, I guess you have to, how do you deal with that? Like, obviously, the person who shot somebody,
So usually is what happens. I mean, the bottom line is you have a crime that has to be investigated. So there's a shooting.
Right.
That gets investigated and it goes through the process. The affirmative defense for that individual would be, hey, I was abused for years. They would go back and look at any calls that were there, all the incidents, all the witnesses, there's usually person friends,
Right.
all kinds of things that would bring that forward through that. But it still has to be investigated
That's what.
as that crime, whether it be a homicide or a shooting or an attempted homicide, because the person survived.
Right.
That still goes through that process.
So then I was also,
Someone just has that in the city.
looking at the reality screen,
Yes.
and so. Then you confront, that somebody is considered high risk through this screen, and they just say, yes, but I'm staying here, whatever.
You can't force people, so you'll see where it says about referrals being triggered. We still will try to get them the assistance. If they don't take it, they don't
Right.
take it, but we still let the folks know that we support agencies like Circle. So that they can maybe without us, make those contacts to try to get the individual help. But we do meet a lot of individuals that just refuse.
And it's not up to your officers to decide whether that's fear or choice.
There's certain factors that they can look at to see that, they may be afraid to say something. In those cases, they'll try to do something different, but at the end of the day, if they don't want the help, we provide them the resources that are there.
Is that it? So down, under F. The first bullet point says when possible, officers will contact Circle. And, my tongue in cheek note was when would it be impossible? I mean, why wouldn't they contact Circle?
If there's, if this is like in the middle of an incident where they're dealing, or they're trying to de-escalate the incident. And if it's during court hours, or it's non-hours, they'll provide them a ride to the police department, but it may not be possible in that split second to contact Circle.
I can't imagine in the aftermath of it, but what you're saying is in the heat of the moment, as it were, okay? Right. Fair enough. And then the same thing, and I'm sure it makes sense to you when you explain it, I'll feel like I've done it, but requests with the next bullet point, it says requests from victims 1 or more days after the incident, you're referred to Washington County Superior Court, Family Division.
Mhm.
But not request for information.
No, it's just requests. So for instance, the officers go, say right now, the officers will go and they'll have a domestic situation they're dealing. If a day goes by and folks want the request, they want to have to get like a restraining order, we refer them to the court because it's not in.
What's the difference between a restraining order and trespass order?
So a restraining order can only be issued against somebody that's defined as a household. On the trespassing order can be
And if somebody violates either one, what's the, are they treated the
There's-
same in the sense that?
Restraining order violations are more severe. No no trespassing violations, and trespassing violations pretty much you get a citation for the court. Restraining order violations, you usually can end up getting punished.
Oh, I know it's a great example of that, but where I live right on the corner of Mill Street and College Street. So people love to use my yard to walk their dog. So I'm gonna get cameras because I'm really tired of picking it up. So,
Right.
but what I told the officer, we pointed out, is that really what you need to do is put no trespassing signs. Because then I can have the right to go out in my yard, if I see somebody there with their dogs walking, I say, get off my yard or I'm calling the cops. Put the signs there.
Okay. Are there any other questions on page 8? We'll move to page 9. Domestic standby and documentation and reporting covered on this page. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move to page 10. This covers enforcement of protection orders. Any questions there? Hearing none, we'll move to page 11. Which covers foreign abuse prevention orders. So under the foreign, I have a couple of things. And again, I'm sure you're going to be able to explain, but it says under bullet point B, under first bullet point, order grants relief available under Vermont law. And so does Vermont specifies that Brazil, for instance,
Yeah, there
we
could-
can do these?
Yeah, there could be some reciprocals, non-reciprocal states that have to be. They would have to come here and get a restraining order as well. But there are reciprocal states like the surrounding states and most of the states within the United States. Are reciprocal.
Yeah.
So you can automatically make that arrest. There's some.
So if someone comes here from Ohio
Right.
and harasses somebody in Vermont and there's a,
There's a whole.
Or-
Ohio
or-
law,
yeah.
Yes, they could be
you
arrested.
can be enforced.
But there's non-reciprocal ones where they would be told they would have to go to a court.
And so the same thing would apply to, again, Brazil or New Zealand. We just have, they'd have to look up to see if there's a reciprocation in place. Okay. Foreign abuse order, I got a note under D here, so enforce the terms provided. I guess the question is, why do some places, for instance, and that's my question, why does Vermont have a maximum of 12 and 3 years for a second or subsequent event?
That's
So in other words, someone who has an order of protection
Yeah, there's,
has to renew it every year.
Never read that, but it's that way.
yep, and you can, if there's circumstances that warrant the reissuance, they'll reissue it. There's oftentimes where you've had a restraining order that's only valid for a year, and you may have gotten one extension for another year. And then the judge will be, there's really no reason the person moved away or whatever. and So we don't.
But just because there's no supposed contact, somebody can't get a third year, for instance, a year scenario.
There could be issues that they wouldn't do an extension. And we don't have control of that.
I have a
So,
question. With regards to the vows or NCIC,
Mhm.
in order for protection, to check to see if there's one in place.
Mhm.
It seems like somewhere I read that if it's down, if that system is down, then you can't check or something. I Voted in.
Yes, there was, you're right, I read that too. Yeah, no, I agree.
So what
It said if
happens?
NCIC is down. And as I remember, it said that if it can't be verified.
Right.
then I
Right
don't
under
think
that
they can
saying, it
enforce
says
it.
if not verified, the officer may not take action based on the possibility of production or however the officer should advise. The possible consequences of the protection orders in stand. So that is the false arrest situation. If somebody comes in and says, oh, well, I have an order. And they don't, you can just go latch on to somebody, we have to verify.
Right.
That's the Constitution.
So if that's the case, it say something happened and your an officer couldn't verify it for a good reason, not the system is down. Then you just would assess it based on whatever else is happening. Kind of
So for
pushing
instance,
outside
if you're committing a crime, say you committed domestic assault, and there's also a restraining order in effect, but we couldn't verify it, you would be charged with the domestic. Once that was verified, you would be additionally charged at a later time with that. However, if it's just a situation where you call us and say, I have a restraining order and it says he can't be within 300 feet from me and he just walked by my house. That would be one of your situations that you would just said, we would assess the situation. We may tell that individual that, you know, we can't verify the existence of the order right now. You may be charged when we can verify that. However, you stop walking by the house just in case.
Any other questions on 11? That puts us on to page 12, which is the supervisor's role and responsibilities and the signature page. Chief. So I don't believe we made any changes to this policy. In agreement, we had lots of discussion. They're welcome. So I would listen to a motion to approve number 414 of their operational procedures, domestic violence policy. So motion and a second. Any other further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are unanimous again. Next, we will discuss and consider approving the radio communications policy. Page 1. Number 418, police radio communications. Under policy, vital public safety, I put a note at the end with the prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I guess I gotta see what I wrote that in for reference to. False calls or distress signals, superfluous or unidentified communications obscene or profane language, transmission of unassigned call signals or other professional conduct is strictly prohibited. Is there any prosecution, I guess is what I was asking there, or is it strictly
that's-
in-house?
That's just the FCC rules.
Okay,
that come, like when you have a radio license, you have to abide by those rules. That's what we use.
Okay.
But yes, if somebody was using obscene language, on the radio, it would be dealt.
okay. But not necessarily in a lawful manner, your law.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else on page 1?
So can I do just a clarification? So the emergency communication center, is that something like?
Dispatch.
I never heard all that.
Okay. Anything else on page 1? Page 2, falls in with the ECC and communication dispatcher and communication supervisor, which is a future position. Anything on page 2?
Is that in a bit somewhere?
Hoping to get it in the next budget.
What is the next one?
We've already approved the budget for
Yeah.
24-25. So the next one, when we start working on that budget this fall, we're gonna put it in there. Unless it comes to a point where, under the grand scheme of the state's illustrious getting rid of all the dispatching, we take on the contracts. Where we have dispatch staff. And that would be funded through.
What isn't, so isn't there like consolidated something or other in this area? There was Montpelier and
There's not, you're probably thinking of Central Vermont Public, the CVPSA. That was kind of a working entity that was trying to regionalize dispatch over the past several years and it didn't pan out. Now it's gotten to the point where the state police have said, we're not dispatching anymore. For other entities, and that came about. So 99% of the time, if you're a municipality or police department, you often have your own dispatch, depending on the size of your agency. But you have, where it falls into the cracks, is you have a majority of communities that have volunteer fire force, volunteer fire departments in the state, and said, you know, they're just trying to push them off. So all these communities have fire departments that are volunteer that don't have anybody to dispatch. So that's where this regionalization plan is taking shape as to who's going to dispatch for who. And then they become contracts, which brings in revenue. So it's simple, but it's complicated.
Right. Well, how does that fire department pay for that? I mean, how does that work? If it's not,
The municipality has to pay for it, otherwise they don't get dispatch services.
right,
And those are based on factors of call volume and, you know, those types of things.
so when you just talked about it could change if we need to hire more people, what could change?
So if hypothetically speaking, if we had 2 or 3 communities that came to us and said, hey, we need dispatching, you know, can you give us a contract, and we figure out what the cost would be, our call volume increases, whereas we would maybe only have 1 dispatcher sitting in there. We would need 2 because the call volume.
And the fire department is their own dispatch.
No, this dispatch center
Does
serves
everything.
everything, as well as a few neighboring communities.
So it's a 911 in here. Does this need to be updated to record to include the national suicide hotline? It's the 988. So there's no risk of the number.
Well, we have, there's 211, there's 511, there's all those, so it's just the designated 911 call that comes through. We have a 911 line that when PSAT answers it, it gets funded through that.
Anything else on page 2? Moving on to page 3. I had a question, first bullet point, chief. It says patrol supervisor is responsible for ensuring proper deployment radio protocol. That's just for the officers, correct?
And the patrol supervisor, for instance, like right now, the patrol supervisor, because there's no administration.
That's not an uncommon thing. I mean, more.
Yeah.
No,
No.
it's a pretty common practice that, unless you're a large enough communications division where you have there's a constant supervisor on that runs that, then the patrol supervisor is the ultimate supervisor for everybody.
Is there any other questions on page 3? We move to page 4, which includes radio procedure and protocol. Anybody have anything on page 4?
So when people have like a radio at home and they listen to all these things. And then they put it on Facebook or whatever.
Oh, yes.
Your favorite?
Oh, yes.
So they I mean, don't understand all these numbers, do they?
Oh,
Or do
yes.
they?
So if you right now, if you went onto Google and looked for called law enforcement 10 codes,
They're out
they would show you by specific area what those 10 codes
there. Okay.
are. And one of the movements, if you will, in the communication, which is talked about here, is talking about plain speech. Because when you have instances, a major incident where there's a lot of individuals coming together, not everybody knows, for instance, the fire department doesn't use our 10 codes. So when you're talking about interoperability between agencies and between all the players of a major incident, it's easier to use plain speak. So that's being more and more acceptable. And 10 codes, everybody knows what they're. Keeping something from anybody.
Any other questions on page 4? Moving to page 5. So under brief and concise, second bullet point. Just read strangely to me, radio messages should be acknowledged promptly when. And the dispatch or relay of detailed information communicated thereafter.
Awesome.
Okay,
It's impossible. Because there are times where, if somebody's on the phone, you can't get to them. Usually they're very good about saying, stand by. Yeah. But it's supposed to say.
okay. Anything else on page 5? We'll move to page 6. We're still in all the radio procedures and protocols. If ECIC, NCIC is down, the communications dispatcher will not hold the request until the system is operational unless specifically requested. Officers should not ask for returns.
Returns meaning if I run a license plate, and you give me the return,
Oh.
telling me what the license plate.
So if you get stopped going up and down. Get a pass.
That's. Can always email the ticket at a later date.
So it says officers will be advised when the communications dispatcher has processed the request. So the communications dispatcher will say the request that you had at 1640
Right, it's just-
for a vehicle identification or something.
Quite often the system does go down, and if somebody's out running traffic and doing something. Then the dispatcher will work, pay the systems back up, it just doesn't that type of program.
So the system does go down often. I wouldn't think that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. Interesting.
Speeding is speeding regardless. You just may not know if your license and registration is valid.
No, Berry City moved the one at the bottom of Hill Street, and Berry Towns at the top of Hill Street doesn't work, so I can't keep track of how fast I'm going anymore.
We realize that they have them programmed so that if you're going above a certain speed, it doesn't flash anymore because they don't want people.
Oh, maybe the one does work
So if
then.
you're going by it at 65, it's gonna look blank.
I just figured it wasn't working, you know, but. Anyway. Hope Buzzy doesn't hear that. Moving to page 7, we're done on page 6, correct? Okay, moving to page 7. This is an attempt to look out, be on the lookout, BOLs. And under A. I have a note that says no verbal BOLs. Without a warrant exists, must state the specific crime be associated with a written report. So, in other words,
So if, for instance, there's different types of vehicles. If I'm following you and you're weaving all over the road, I call up dispatch and say, there's a red truck, Vermont plate all over the road. They're gonna issue a BOL for an erratic driver, because it could be a possible DUI. If you have a BOL that says so-and-so just committed a domestic assault and they need to be arrested, that needs a written report because you're an officer that's gonna go out and take somebody else's word for it. Again, you have that constitutional right of that individual to not be arrested for an unlawful purpose. So you have to have that written probable cause affidavit that says he's arrestable if he's seen.
so you respond to 123 Smith Street and. Someone has made the allegation that their spouse or significant other hurt them, and there's probable cause to believe that there's blood, there's whatever. You can't issue a BOLO or a BOL at that time.
You can, but you're gonna have to have that written report to back it up within.
Okay, so that can be,
You just can't go like days without doing your written report because then the officer made the arrest.
Got
And that has to be. Yes.
Right.
I was taking you for, meaning you have to come back, you have to
Oh,
do the
no,
written
no, no.
report
No,
before you can
Right,
even
if,
issue,
if,
okay.
if we go to a scene and it's like, you know, so-and-so just assaulted me and they just left and there's evidence there, you can. It's a place to look out, but if Berlin arrests the person and takes them into custody, somebody's gotta have that written report for the probable cause affidavit to resolve that
Okay.
situation.
Did they write it right on my computer?
Sorry, I was taking it literally that you had to wait. That's why I was
Do
questioning.
they have like speech recognition software like that speeds up the process?
Some officers use that. Or some do dictation for them.
Depends on how often they have to use the word buried.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
So that we already answered, so I was asking about written down below, so we've got that. Anything else on page 7? We'll move to page 8. No questions on page 8? Move to page 9. This goes into call assignment. Anything on page 9? We'll move to page 10, which talks about anonymous, reluctant, and sex crime complainants and victims. and requests for assistance from other agencies. Nothing on page 10. We move to page 11. Covers security and review of a recorded conversation. Did we see something similar to this in a previous? This has been. Seems to me we did something about review of recorded conversations. No, that was not deposition. Yeah. Got it.
Yes, I agree.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else on page 11? Page 12 is the signature page, so. We once again. Number of questions. I don't believe we changed anything.
It was just under. The. The possible was left out.
Yes. page
Oh,
5.
yes, that's correct.
Yep.
Thank you. So then I would entertain a motion to approve policy 418, police radio communications as amended. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Right.
Aye. We have another unanimous approval.
I can't wait for the time when it's not unanimous.
I'm sure they'll do it every time.
Just throwing that out.
Majority win.
Or an abstention.
For this.
Well, I know that Perry City's mayor asks every time, was it unanimous?
Really?
Yes. Yeah. So Nicholas and all of his communications, when he copies us, says all were approved unanimously. So. Criminal investigations policy. Number 601. This is a biggie.
Yes, yes, it is.
We got about 43 minutes. Actually, we got about 35 minutes because we have miscellaneous, two quick things to discuss. So I'm not suggesting that we hurry, but I know the chief would like to get this approved as well. So we'll start page 1. Anybody have anything on page 1? You had
This
that,
one.
don't you? Yep. Okay. Page 2. Under providing first aid to injured persons, second line, summonsing. First, administering first aid and summoning, maybe is the right, summonsing.
Summoning,
Okay,
summoning,
yeah.
give him a summons.
Anything else on page 2? We'll move to page 3. Anything on page 3 for anybody? We'll move to page 4. Anything on page 4? And
Okay, so video.
Yes, it could happen with your phone, or we do have like video cameras, the detectives do.
okay, page 5. Thing on page 5. We'll move to page 6, and if you have the updated one in front of you, this includes solvability factors. There's nothing on page 6. We'll move to page 7. And I noticed that the 4th and 5th bullet point are identical.
Oh, yes.
And I almost thought the next one was, but they were a little different. At least the header is. Anything else on page 7? Moving to page 8, which will cover case status and management. Sorry, I mixed some of the old with the new. I apologize. So we're on to 8. Field interview.
Page 8,
The old page 8 had field interview on it, so that must be.
page 8 has 2 bullets remaining for salvability factors, and then it goes into case status and management. bullets.
Correct,
And then we're-
Yep.
yeah, Roman numeral.
and then. Man. I mixed the 2 for my notes and so I apologize, so. The new page 9. Has investigative case file on it. Folks, I'm sorry.
Like the evidence closet, like we hear of. So and so went into the evidence closet. This,
So the evidence room here can only be accessed by the property manager and his assistant, which currently is the detective sergeant and the detective. Even I can't get into it.
Can they look at in each one themselves separately, or do they need the other one together?
It's all, you know, you can-
Yeah. I'm curious about that. I know a bank, there was a bank, and 2 separate.
Well, you have to have some things within the room requires 2
Yeah.
to get.
Page 9. Within page 8. Anybody have anything on page 9? Switching to page 10. Special investigative procedures. Nothing on page 10, we'll move to page 11. Anybody have anything on page 11? Okay. Moving to page 12. One identification. Anybody have anything on page 12? Page 13, photographic lineup. So. Under photographs. Photographic lineups will be conducted by a blind administrator who does not know the suspect's identity. And I'm just curious, why not the investigating officer?
So there is and again, this is a model policy per statute that you have to follow. For instance, if I'm investigating an individual. And this came about with all the false confessions in the Innocent Project. If I'm investigating a case and I don't pick a certain individual, I could just, kind of make nodding gestures or whatever. So for instance, I actually had to administer a photo lineup here. A couple months ago, actually, because I didn't know any of the people that were involved in this case. So I'm like, I don't know who's who. Sorry. You tell me who, you know, can you identify anybody? So we have to ask a certain criteria. We have to follow the criteria, ask a certain number of questions, certain questions, if you will, you know, how certain, you know, does anybody look familiar, those types of things. we have to follow the policy.
He asked
which
the
is-
questions without having
Yeah.
any influence at all.
Yeah. And that's all part of the innocent project. and all that. So all of these are in statute, photograph lineups, one-on-one identification show ups, it's all.
So that's page 13. Anything else on page 13? Moving to page 14. Covers criminal history and background investigations and surveillance. Hearing nothing on 14. We will move to page 15. Polygraph examination or other truth-telling device. Like a empath or what other truth-telling device?
Right now, there's only a polygraph, but if there ever becomes another replacement.
Okay, fair enough. Just was curious.
You never heard of the photocopier? Where it says, oh, look, it said you're lying.
Looks like my handwriting, but it's not. All right, anything else on page 15? Oh, you know what? I had a question on polygraphs. Is that conducted in-house?
Yeah.
DSP do it or?
DSP does polygraph examinations as well as certified polygraphers who basically are retired state troopers that were polygraphers for them
Yeah.
that went and bought their own equipment
Mhm.
and went on to conduct polygraphs.
Okay. Now, is there any other questions on 15? We'll move to 16. Covers informant use and informant master files.
Why
Any-
is it just the yes? And not
Because it's one of those specialties, costs a lot of money to obtain the equipment and send folks out to the training. So ESP does those specialty things, like, for instance, the major crimes unit, we call them when there's a homicide because they have the mobile command
Right.
and it's just the cost.
And how many polygraphs are you using?
We technically, we only do polygraphs for people getting. I don't.
So it's rare.
Yeah, it's rare.
So that's page 16. Moving on to 17. Anybody have any questions there? We'll move on from page 17 to page 18. Juveniles and informants, the second bullet. Officers will diligently strive to protect the juvenile informant from physical and emotional harm and shall not allow the juvenile to be placed in possible danger without the parent or guardian's full written permission and knowledge. So they're allowed to place a juvenile in danger if they have the parent's, guardian or guardian's full written permission or knowledge.
So for instance, if you have a 17-year-old, you're still considered juvenile. And it could be. I'll just say, for lack of a better term, a bad actor. And there may be instances where they could be in danger just by being an informant, so you have to have that written consent for that.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on page 18? We'll move to page 19. This is criteria for paying informants and informant funds. Anything there? Hearing nothing, we'll go to page 20. Page 20. I think anyway. Possible. I may have gone too fast. I'm working off of two different sheets. I apologize. Gold 16. Utilized as witnesses. Various members will maintain proper attitude. Sorry, back on page 18. Again, I'm working from the old copy because that's where my notes were. My apologies. Members will maintain a proper attitude with informants. Precautions must be taken at all times to guard against allegations of misconduct, and I'm assuming the precautions in question must be like a recording, an audio or a video or both.
Yes. Usually when you have informants, that's why it talks about having two folks when you do informants. Because if, for instance, if you watch movies where somebody ends up having a relationship with an informant, those types of things, you have to maintain the proper attitude with informants. You can't mistreat them just, because of their past, and they're trying to help you now type.
And it talks about, which I guess is at the top of page 19, apologize again. The special precautions taken for conducting activities with a juvenile informant or informant of the opposite sex. Can you just give us an outline of what those precautions are? Is it just the
Again,
fact that you're having the two-
you're having two people involved in that, so.
So page 20. We were good on, correct?
Yes.
Page 21, which covers the investigative resources. Under the Vermont Narcotics Investigation Unit, letter A. The first paragraph there, I have a note at the end that talks about what kind of, would there be shift coverage? Investigation directors ongoing, available for activation 24 hours a day to assist law enforcement. So you have members, if they're called out, so you would have to call someone in to have shift coverage for them.
No.
No.
So the Vermont Narcotics Investigation Unit is a unit that's run by the state police, which is comprised of members from various agencies. We currently have nobody that's in, they call it NIU. We don't have anybody assigned to NIU.
Okay.
But if we have an issue where we need to call them, that's their sole function. So if we had somebody assigned to the NIU, they would not be here.
Right.
We would be paying them. They would get we would get reimbursed by the state. We could backfill their position. But that person is off. They
So
could be
they're
down-
off, yeah, okay.
They could be down in Brattleboro.
Okay.
They could be wherever. They could even be out of state doing whatever.
Okay,
Um,
that makes sense. That's why I was wondering about that.
That's a special state police team.
Anything else on page 21? Page 22 continues and includes cold case investigation. No questions there?
And ironically, we have, there's this company that just came out with. Forgive me, I forget what it is, but they have some news thing, they're looking at cold cases. Apparently, there was a 1952 homicide in Dove City. Where somebody was cut with a flooring knife. In some flooring factory here. And this company through the state police wants any evidence from that case to see if they can solve.
Cold case stuff. Oh,
Just a comment on that. My wife and I were the ones that owned on the road, that's like 30 years ago. And I got a cold case. Yeah, her daughter was babysitting the house and everything. So they know they still have it. That's an idea, they could, but we'll have to see that.
Wow.
Usually with the cold cases. You assume relatively with some sort of confidence who the responsible person is, you just don't know.
mhm. one of the so awesome to get in and dig and solve finally. So, that closure.
Anything else on page 22? Moving to page 23. On C at the top of the page. I'm just curious, how do you accomplish this? Is this,
What's that? Do you
the,
understand?
yeah, I mean, how do you say, okay, is it on a calendar? Is it?
Yeah, you can have flags in the system to go back. And bring the. to-
Perfect. Thank you. Submit the evidence under investigator's responsibility. This profile to. DNA profile does not match the suspect's DNA profile. And I guess in reflection, does that need to be resubmitted at some point? Or will it just pop up and match at some point?
So any CODIS is the repository for DNA. So when you submit the profile to CODIS, what happens is it sits there and everything gets checked against that. So for instance, 3 years from now, you could get a sexual assault kit or something that gets run, all the DNA, when we send it up to the lab, it gets checked against CODIS. And, you know, you may have a hit. Later on, from out of state, everybody uses CODIS. And then they'll get in touch and say, look, we just had this, you know, this DNA profile in this person. Hit the CODIS and you end up solving your case, somebody else's as well.
Dry spot. Excuse me. That is on. Excuse me. Page 23. I'm gonna excuse myself a moment. Go get it off.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Should we even try and do it? Also, door used for fire, or I was in Virginia, so when you said that the person never showed up.
Water out there, that's almost as good. Okay. I have my voice back for most of it. Excuse me. Page 23. So you had a mark there.
I just did that afterwards, yeah. For myself.
Okay, anything else on page 23? Move along to page 24. Anybody have anything on page 24? Hearing nothing. Another question.
See, search one. 11. That NA. If the necessity for an immediate service of a search warrant is required by the circumstances of the incident, the state attorney's office, or if after normal business hours, a call, if the state attorney will be contacted for guidance prior to the presentation to a judge.
Usually it takes, you know, specifically if you're on call,
Yeah.
they'll call you right back.
They
and say,
will.
Yeah, just scan the affidavit, they'll send the affidavit, they'll look at it, say you're good to go. Or they'll say, I suggest you change this or put this in.
I'm curious if they like got back to you right away, or what if they don't get back to you right away.
It depends on the imminence for what the circumstances are. Obviously, if you're doing the search warrant, something that happened, you know, evidence of a crime that happened a while ago, there's, you know, you can wait until it gets reviewed, but if you're like looking for a missing child, you know,
Yeah.
you'll like that.
Yeah.
So it depends on the circumstances.
Okay, anything else on 24? Page 25 is the signature page. So we had summons in. A lot of questions. I don't think you have any other. Well, your fortune telling isn't saying the truth. Oh, the duplicate, that's right. So 2 changes there.
Yeah.
So. I would entertain a motion to approve 601 criminal investigations as amended.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Another unanimous approval.
I thought you were gonna say something.
Well done. So. The other item that Councilor Wazazak has brought up a couple of times is to discuss expanding our committee to 7 members. I'm not sure. To be honest with you, that falls within our ability. I have a feeling that that's council work. If it is ours, are we interested in adding 2 more people?
Is it necessary? I mean, in case
Only
we
if
don't,
council says it is.
only council says it is.
Is there any concern? I mean, or is it just based on what other committees have or what?
I don't know. Councilor Wazazak has mentioned it a couple of times.
I
You
know
mentioned just because sometimes we don't have a quorum.
Right.
Yes.
And other people, other, committees have like 9 people on them, on there, so.
And if say, like I was out of state all of April, would I have been able to zoom in
Sure will.
to, okay, good, then there'll always be a forum. I'll be back and forth to Virginia, but.
Yep.
I'll make sure that it's not at meeting, but.
No, and I shared the councilors, frustration at times with us not having a quorum. I don't know if that doesn't mean that if we had 7, that we would still have a quorum either.
Right, exactly. So then why do we need it?
I'm wondering, you said some of the other committees have 9, but do they get all 9 all the time, or is it just,
Right.
and I guess not really, well, it doesn't be a concern. What would that do to the continuity of kind of where we come from and where we are now, and is that gonna affect that at all?
Right.
I don't know, but it's a question.
That would be mine too.
I wouldn't disagree. We all work well together. I think and we've accomplished a lot, and the chief, is carrying the load, but we're all doing our homework. We all come prepared. We all have good questions. I will tell Councilor Wazazak that we discussed it and we feel comfortable with 5. Unless council tells us differently.
And they do have the final say then.
Yeah, I mean, we serve at their pleasure, so.
I suppose.
Mhm.
I mean, when they asked for people to apply for the, it goes out pretty, it's like on Search Forum and it's on the website.
Oh, yeah,
at the
yeah.
Time, and,
Yep.
I mean, is he feeling like there's not enough access to know that there's a committee? I'm sorry, I heard him kind of at the end of it. And was he talking?
Yes, yeah, he was, right, when he was during his report, He may be looking for varied approaches and opinions on the committee. I don't know. It could be that simple.
I'm not sure. I know there's been a lot of work on the committee recently. Nicholas King. He, being an outsider, as well as I, made the same observation of the committee.
Yeah.
And some of the committees duplicate themselves. So he's like, whoa, let's pare this down. So it's been back and forth, and going through a couple renditions through council. So I honestly, that's the first I heard that he had brought that up, and I don't know whether it was from himself or if it was discussed in council. I don't know. So,
It's the second time he brought it up, that's why I wanted to discuss it. Like I say, I'll reach out to him and I'll copy Nicholas and just let them know that we're comfortable with 5 and. Must be here differently, that's what we're proceed with. Nicholas, I would assume at this point that it's too late to add additional people, so it would be something that they would approach next year. Unless they're gonna make a unilateral decision.
yeah, I don't know if there's like an application deadline.
There is,
Okay, so I'm,
which the 3 of us meant.
yeah, then that's already passed.
Yes, and then the last thing is a lot of what we do is it's pretty dry. You know, it's reading policies and it's very important what we do, but you know, when you're looking at radio procedures, you know, it doesn't have that much effect on you, but I will say that in going through the mental health issue and impairment and the domestic violence, that was a little bit heavier work this time. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate all of your work on it because you know, it has an opportunity to open up stuff that may not be easy for us. And one of the reasons that I asked you if you knew what those numbers were, was because I had a feeling that they were substantial.
And for instance, I will put some policies that I like, the telephone communications, I know, you know. It's gonna just, I will add, you know, a few light ones with a heavier one. For instance, the ones in the queue are warrantless search and seizure. That's probably gonna have more questions from the counselor.
Yeah.
As well as the girl. So I will put some lighter ones in that one.
I mean, I watched the council meetings on occasion. Do they have a lot of questions? We put through and that?
The offer, so is what Nicholas does is. I'll take the clean copy, send them to him, he'll send them to Nicholas, Nicholas will send them to the council and say, if you have any questions, let us know.
I'm assuming they trust that, you know, Teddy's doing his homework and he seems to be, you know, I think he's attentive and pays attention. And so I'm assuming that they trust his, if there's something that he felt was gonna get the city in trouble or that he would speak up, so. And the fact that, you know, the chief writes such good policies makes a difference. It's something they weren't used to previously. It makes a big difference. So that's it for me, unless somebody else has something under miscellaneous.
Next week is National Police Week.
Stand. Sure, that's in the minutes. All right, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:49. Have a motion in a second. Pretty sure that we all want to go home, so anyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thanks, Bob.
Well, against her.